this point, I have a fantastic pleasure of introducing Inbal Becker-Reshef. Really, one of the, you can sit down, it's going to be a while. It's really someone who just is a huge catalyst for a lot of this sort of stuff and a connector through, if not everyone in the room, hopefully by the end of this, today and tomorrow, a connector to everyone in this room. And so Inbal has really had just significant and sustained contributions. The whole application of Earth observations, satellite information to agriculture monitoring from the field to global scales. It's really sort of supporting decisions on food security and agricultural markets. We know that she's done this directly as well as through teams that she's been on and teams that she leads. So currently she's the director of the Harvest Consortium, the NASA Harvest Program, and she's also the co-director of the Center for Global Agricultural Monitoring Research at the University of Maryland. We know that she's had quite a bit of activities related to GeoGlam, and she's the program scientist for the GeoGlam initiative, and also was pretty key and critical supporting that initiative and getting up and going, working with a lot of national and international partners. Closer to NASA Earth, she has been a member of our water resources team and also on the severe applied sciences team. She's leading the food security and agriculture team. And so fittingly, recently, the U.S. State Department recognized her with an Aspire Innovation Award for her work in food security and technologies. So with that, Dr. Becker-Reshef.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Lawrence, and thank you all for being here. We're extremely excited to be kicking off this engagement and conference day. It's a huge honor to have the administrator here opening the meeting and really showing the strong support that NASA has always had and still has in their commitment to the strengthening of the use of Earth observations in support of agricultural and food security decisions. I think you've heard a little bit about Harvest and the Harvest Consortium. As you've all heard, it is somewhat of an experiment on the NASA Applied Sciences on bringing in and emphasizing the importance of agriculture and food security. But it's an experimental approach, and I think a courageous one, and took a lot of vision from both Lawrence and Brad. We're here to think about how do we do this in a different way and in an innovative way, and took a big chance on this consortium and on us to implement that vision. And to give some context and background to where we came from on the NASA Harvest Consortium, I think NASA has had a long-term commitment to agricultural monitoring, and as many of you in the room probably know, and some of you have been involved for that long, really goes back to the early to the late 1960s and 1970s. And especially with the start of the AgriStars and LACY programs and strong partnership with the USDA. But despite 40 plus years of work and research in the field of Earth observations for applications to agricultural monitoring, there's still a huge potential left to be realized for agricultural monitoring and for fully realizing our capabilities. And I think Harvest comes at a time where it's really being able to benefit from and take advantage of all the advances and capabilities to realize, in some sense, what the vision was going back all the way to the time of the start of LACY and AgriStars. Okay, so very quickly, for those of you who are not familiar, what is Harvest? And Harvest is a new innovative program, as I said, launched by the Applied Sciences program, with both a domestic and international focus. We're very much focused on developing and implementing agricultural applications with a wide range of stakeholders and users, and really making sure that we're being guided by, and all our activities are guided by end users and stakeholders, so we're not working in a vacuum on the research side. And as you heard, we are being carried out by a coordinated multi-sectoral consortium, both across private and public sectors and across geographies, really ranging across the world. And we're also working to connect across various NASA Applied Sciences and research programs and various agricultural activities ongoing, including through severe and the land change program. and have a strong focus on trying to demonstrate the socioeconomic benefits of the use of Earth observations and the impact of this kind of work. And I think, as you've heard from Lawrence, this is this consortium approach is an experiment, and in our experience so far, I think that it's so far proven to be quite a successful approach. And so, again, some context in background, which I already talked about, and here you go. Really, NASA's commitment has been long-term in this space, and in fact, goes back to the earliest days of agricultural monitoring, satellite agricultural monitoring. And you heard a little bit before about the LACY program and AgriScars from jointly by USDA and NASA. And that was the vision at the time, and if you look at where we are today, that vision hasn't changed so much. What has changed is our ability to implement it. And so for a long time we've been hearing quotes like this one, which remote sensing is always going to be the technology of the future. I think we're more now coming to the point where this is actually the technology of today. And what we need to be careful about is to be very clear about where we are today in the research, where we are in our ability to transfer the research into applications, and making sure not to oversell our capabilities, but at the same time promote what is possible and understand where there needs to be still a focus on research. And so while AgriStar and especially LACY was launched following major price spikes in international markets in the mid-'70s, more recently there were the market price spikes in 2008 and again in 2011, and there was a real international recognition that we needed to enhance the information on crop production globally, and that this was really critical for implementing agricultural policies and for stabilizing markets as well as for food security. And so the G20 Ministers of Agriculture's response was to launch an action plan on food security and market price volatility. And within that action plan, they launched two initiatives. One you've heard of quite a bit already on GeoBlem, and the other was AMIS, where the GeoBlem focus was really on stabilizing markets and enhancing the use of Earth observations. Many of you here today are coming through partnership from GeoBlem, and GeoBlem has got a huge amount of contributions. We've been very involved in both initiating and today in still very much participating in GeoBlem, and we have the GeoBlem director here with us today. And that international forum really helped to forge the partnerships that led to the creation of Harvest. And today, NASA Harvest is NASA's contribution into this G20 program. And so who then is NASA Harvest? We're a consortium of over 45 members from public and private sector, from government and humanitarian organizations, and here's the mix of logos. When we're continuously expanding our partnerships as we move forward. And our primary objective is to help empower decisions that support food security, stable markets, and economic progress, and sustainable, resilient crop production through advancing the awareness and the operational uptake of Earth observations, and focusing both on smallholder and large production agriculture. And so you've heard a little bit, but why is NASA involved in this, and what is the merit, and where do satellite data, how are they able to contribute to monitoring agriculture? They offer a cost-effective and timely and transparent way to look at the world and to provide various indicators and information on our agricultural landscapes. And as I said, I think today we're in a very different space than we even were just a few years ago, with major advances both in the data sets that we have and in the observations that we have, but also on the compute side and on the analytics side and on the ground side. And that's really helping us be today in a very different position to help realize some of the vision that's been long held for since the early 70s. And so here's NASA's Earth observing fleet of satellites, a large range of various satellites circling the Earth and collecting a lot of information very much relevant for monitoring our agricultural lands. And it's important that this information is timely if we're talking about agriculture and so this is, for example, what the world looked like as of yesterday. It's not only important to have information that's timely, it's also important to have a long-term data record. And so if we want to look at how does the crop situation look like today versus the same time last year or a previous year when we know there was an extreme event, or how does the landscape in agriculture changing over time, it's really critical to have these observations for a long period of time. But what's also critical, for those of you who are on the operational side in different organizations and agencies, if you're going to commit to the uptake and to use of these data, you want to know that there's a commitment from the space agencies to continue to provide these data ships and to these data. And there has been a strong commitment from NASA, but other space agencies as well, exactly to continue to do that. As we all know, our agricultural landscapes and croplands look very differently across the world, and what that means is that we need to look at constellations and at different types of missions to be able to help and support monitoring these landscapes. And one of the big challenges is developing methodologies that are robust that can help monitor these diverse landscapes. NASA is not the only one putting up missions, and it's got a strong partnership with ESA, for example, as well, and these are the Copernicus satellites, and these have also really helped to revolutionize our capabilities and being able to monitor globally, but at the field scale on a near daily basis. And in particular, there's been a strong partnership between NASA and ESA, and also harmonizing and using the Landsat and the Sentinel, for example, through the harmonized data set. And so while we were traditionally have relied on 1 to 250 kilometer daily observations, and these are still really critical for a lot of the monitoring we're doing, we're also now coming close to being able to, we have 30 to 10 meter resolution on a global level, almost daily, and going towards having 3 meter resolution provided through various commercial satellites. And so what is our approach to really accomplishing what we're trying to do is, and NASA Applied Sciences emphasizes from the beginning, is that we have to be, in everything that we're doing is end user driven, and making sure, and that's the only way to make sure that the applications are then going to have the impact and have the uptake that we're looking for. We've forged strategic partnerships, recognizing that no one organization has a solution, and we really have to come together to address the various challenges that we're facing. And so looking really at the full data to decision train, those providing the data, the research, all the way through various private and public sector organizations. Leveraging ongoing and existing activities and trying to enhance those, building on the progress of various international organizations and GeoPlan, and making sure we're coordinated with complementary initiatives. And also trying to communicate and articulate where our priorities and gaps are. And a lot of the way we're doing this is we're set up through some thematic working groups. And so these are some selective thematic working groups that are being co-led from partnerships across the consortium, and you'll hear from many of them today and throughout the rest of the day on the panels. And so what I'd like to do is give you some examples of our activities and a little bit as a teaser for the different panels that you'll be hearing on for the rest of the day. And so the first one is really focused on our role within international markets and trade, really focused on helping to reduce uncertainty and enhancing market transparency early and throughout the growing season. And so this is a slide from Dr. Joe Glauber, you'll hear about later on today, on work that he's been doing with in collaboration with AMIS and with Seth Mayer. And these are looking at USDA forecast errors over the past 20 years, and I'll let him talk more about this. But really the window of opportunity for Earth observations is when the crop is in the ground and ahead of harvest. And with a big focus on looking at how do we better and improve forecast, in particular on anomalous years or during extreme weather events. One of our main activities then has been, and goes back to again that launch of GeoGlom and AMIS, and when they were both launched, AMIS came to us and said, could you provide information for the major production export countries on crop conditions on a monthly basis, but that reflected an international consensus? And so we went back and worked very closely with AMIS, which is much more on the economics and policy side, and you'll hear again more from the AMIS secretary today. And we developed the Crop Monitor. And so we have over 40 contributing organizations that come together to put these publications out. We publish these on a monthly basis. And one of the main accomplishments was to bring together two communities that have been quite siloed, the remote sensing community and the policy and economics communities. And I think we need to not underestimate the importance of just bringing these different communities together to better understand each other and how the data that we have can actually be used. And so this is our assessment from this past month. Anything that's in yellow is conditions where there are some concerns and showing which crops. And if we just look for a moment at the US, I think we're all aware of the current situation, and looking at these pie charts in terms of how much area or how much of the productivity is potentially being currently impacted. And here's looking at northern Illinois, one of the main corn producing states. The image on the left looking at last year versus this year, and of course huge delays in planting and in crop progress, and a lot of crops still withstanding water in fields. And this is causing a lot of uncertainty in markets and having big impact. And again, I'll let the economists talk more about this. But this is what the satellite data looks like. And again, on the left side, northern Illinois, the same area, you see a lot of the crops already progressing in green. And this year, looking still pretty brown. And what we can do is we can also look at the field scale and see where there is standing water, a lot of water in the fields. And I know right now a big question is prevent plant and how many acres. And so this type of information can help inform some of that. But we're not only interested in crop condition, we are also interested in looking at yield and enhancing our yield forecasting capabilities, which they have a role to play as complementary information to survey information, but they do have the advantage of being global and timely. And so these are models working at the global scale, but we're also working at the national, subnational scale, all the way down to the field scale. But it's not only important to be able to forecast production, it's also very important to look at end-of-season yields, and this particular, the field scale, and again, you'll hear more in this work from David LaBelle later on today. And this type of information is really important for understanding yield variability, yield gaps, and helping to guide farmer best practices for improving yields and understanding which interventions have both been effective. But if we want to get down to being able to map at the fields, but at scales, so national to regional scales, the models can only be as good as the data we're feeding them. And I think one of still the big bottlenecks on the remote sensing side is the ground data component. And so we can say all we want, we're in the big data era, which we are. I think we're still somewhat data poor, in particular on the ground observations, and even more so for smallholder agriculture. We're, again, part of the equation, if we're focusing on productivity, is area. And a lot of work going on, and again, you'll hear more about this from Matt Hansen later on today, on using Earth observations for mapping at scale, continentally, crop area, and doing in-season estimates and this is an example from Foy. And recognizing the potential and where we are today in terms of our capabilities, we've seen a huge amount of increasing interest from the private sector in providing information and data and services, utilizing Earth observations for a huge range of agricultural applications, with billions of dollars really being invested into this community. And we recognize, and it's a strong focus for us in Harvest, that the only way to reach our goals and to realize this vision is by partnership, and it's got to be public-private partnerships. And so we're looking at various ways that we can create new business models and win-win situations across and mutually beneficial propositions across public-private sector. We recognize this is still a huge challenge, and we'll have again a panel discussing specifically this later on today. But to give some examples of the work being done through the consortium, this is from Applied Geosolutions. Again, you'll hear from them later today, working on things that you've already heard earlier today by the administrator, on supporting tools for water resource management. And this is, they're working in an example from Arkansas on rice. The other focus we have then is looking at, well, how do we address this big data gap of ground information? And we've been working very closely with Swiss Re to think about how can we look at some mutually beneficial propositions, and have launched a big ground data collection initiative on the big production countries, and we're looking now to initiate a similar initiative for smallholders. And so that segues into the third thematic panel on food security and early warning, and recognizing that while we have a lot of really advanced capabilities for monitoring big production in agricultural areas, there's still a huge amount of uncertainty and an even bigger need for being able to increase our accuracy in forecasting and monitoring the countries that are most at risk to food insecurity. And so, following the crop monitor for AMIS, the humanitarian organizations came together and said, we have an even bigger need for understanding and reducing uncertainty around food insecure countries. And so we launched the crop monitor for early warning, and this really brings together the major humanitarian organizations as well as regional organizations, and many of you are here today in the room, and again, you'll hear more about this today. And this is from the last assessment, and you can very quickly see the poor and crop failures in southern Africa and also in eastern Africa. And to highlight that, this is a discrepancy map. So this is looking at, through time, just to highlight, how many, when there was different agencies assessing the same location, where there was disagreement. And massive, huge dollar decisions are being made based off of this information. And so this is extremely critical for these organizations to be coming together, sharing their information, sharing their assessment, and reaching a consensus around crop conditions. And so now, given that we're looking at both the big production and early warning countries, we will soon be starting to release global reports as well. And just to say, this has already had a huge impact, the G1 crop monitor for early warning and informing quite a lot of decisions. But we're also looking at, and within our portfolio, we also have tried to have a range of products and application-ready levels in the terminology of NASA. And this is more of an experimental project that we have on trying to help fill the gap of weather station data, and this is looking at some innovative modalities for cheap and self-reporting sustainable rate gauge information. We of course also have a very large focus, and if our objective is for uptake of information, is doing a lot of capacity transfer and working with, in particular, ministries of agriculture across Eastern Africa. And again, many of you who actually are implementing and using this are here with us today, and you'll hear more about that. But really what this has done is there are now national crop monitors being run and developed with a national mandate in several of these countries that are being operationally run by ministries of agriculture and having quite a large impact. And I think the administrator has already described this example and read Martin Moore's quote. He was supposed to be here with us today, but had an emergency back in Uganda and was called on by the president. So unfortunately, he's not here with us today, but he's been a huge supporter and advocate and really demonstrated the use of this type of information, and you'll hear more about this today from Catherine on the impact of this work. And so to summarize, I think it's a really exciting time for satellite-based agricultural monitoring, with really the new era in terms of our capabilities, revolutionizing what we can do. And we're seeing them satellite data playing an increasingly central role across the agricultural sector, from public to private sector. But we also recognize that realizing the full potential and bringing the promise of satellite data requires, one, stakeholders, communities to really be driving the applications and the research. To be innovative in the science and technologies requires partnerships across countries, across organizations, across sectors, and it requires a long-term commitment by the space agencies for continuing to provide openly accessible data. And NASA is really taking advantage and leveraging and building on decades of investment by NASA and other organizations, and to radically advance the uptake of satellite data for informing agricultural decisions. And I'll finally just close by saying, while new data and technologies have a huge potential for progress, I think the only way to really realize that progress is making sure that we're partnering and communicating across communities often that have been siloed. So just quickly to say, the rest of the day, how we decided to set it up will be according to panel discussions on 4 themes that I highlighted, where you'll have some brief presentations from different information providers and stakeholders, followed by discussions by experts in the field. And so with that,